Contingency Log Number 77. Codename, Accursed One. During the infancy of this channel, one of my first contingencies would be against the likes of Timmy Turner, a boy who had proven himself a more than competent adversary even without access to his fairy god parents. But obviously, he is far more dangerous when he can make use of his near unrestricted wishes. But while god parents are typically restricted in only using their magic for their godchild, there are some which tend to ignore this rule, in some cases for their own personal gains, but in other times it would be due to subjects' absent-mindedness, which I would say fits the target Cosmo rather well, one of the two god parents assigned to Timmy, along with his wife Wanda. Cosmo, while endearing quickly to Timmy, and would indulge in the childlike nature of his godson, is not exactly what one would consider to be the best of influences, as more often than not, Timmy would find himself having to be the more mature one of the two, which is saying a lot when you learn more about this boy. But even then, Cosmo's influence over Timmy will win out in the end, typically guiding him down a path which he would deem easy and more fun. Though more often than not, this path will usually backfire spectacularly against him. While I can agree that the influence of another is usually a factor of someone becoming a threat in need of a contingency, for the sake of this video, we'll assume that Cosmo is acting alone, as I already have a contingency for Timmy. That said, even without the addition of Timmy's random and often self-destructive wishes, Cosmo is more than capable of being a danger on his own. In fact, he may be even more so without a voice of reason beside him, with Wanda usually being the angel on his shoulder to prevent him from causing any collateral damage. And if you're wondering just how bad he could be, Cosmo has managed to sink Atlantis 9 times. Don't ask me how. That said, this speaks to an issue when it comes down to Cosmo, which is the fact that much of the damage he does are entirely unintentional. You see, Cosmo's mental abilities are rather stunted to say the least, with apparently a brain condition making it worse. This has affected his actions greatly, causing him to often make decisions without thinking of the repercussions. One of the worst being the time where he accidentally outed himself and his older godchild, revealing himself to be a fairy god parent. This resulted in his godchild not only losing them, but the consequences of this action would still be felt to this day. As that godchild was coincidentally Denzel Crocker, someone who would become one of Timmy's and the entirety of Fairy World's greatest threats. Honestly, it's easy to say that Cosmo is his own worst enemy and will more than likely cause any situation to become far worse before someone else can make it better. His inability to focus being his greatest downfall, something he had admitted to, but he is clearly unable to overcome. Or rather, he would not be able to without proper motivation. For example, Cosmo will often think of himself lesser than without his wife at his side. Wanda, being the brains of the group, makes it easier for him to relax even in stressful situations. But in an event where Wanda had been captured, and Cosmo's magic would become completely ineffective, Cosmo would decide that if he couldn't use magic, he would use his own physical might. You may laugh at this, given that Cosmo has the physical build of a child and has once lost a fight to a house cat. But when it came down to protecting his wife, Cosmo managed to bulk up enough to dish out a decent amount of damage. He's managed to gain this muscle mass after apparently watching a video detailing on how to achieve it in 5 seconds. Now, far be it for me to try to bring logic into this, especially when it comes down to a world which seems to ignore its own established rules for the sake of a joke. But there might be some reasoning as to why Cosmo is capable of gaining so much muscle mass in a short amount of time. You see, Cosmo shares his family lineage with someone who has no issues voicing his disdain for him on a regular basis. The self-proclaimed toughest fairy in the universe, Jorgen von Strangle, would actually end up being a Cosmo's distant cousin. And as for his title, only a quick glance of his physical appearance compared to the rest of Fairy World would be enough to prove this to be the case. Cosmo would temporarily be capable of tapping into his Von Strangle blood, which would also cause him to bulk up significantly, meaning if pushed to his limit, he will be capable of tapping into his dormant genes for a boost of strength. But despite the strengths that Cosmo can carry, they are far outweighed by his weaknesses, and there are quite a few to take advantage of. I do, of course, need to be selective with my countermeasures, as again, while Cosmo's aloof nature can be a detriment, he is still one of the only parental figures in Timmy's life who actually care about him. So I'll be saving the reveal of his existence as a last resort. But there are a few things that I can use to counter him. The first being something I'd brought up before, the use of a net to ensnare Cosmo in. This simple tool being able to not only prevent them from teleporting out, but they also seem incapable of fighting the net off as well. I have net launching gadgets in my equipment already, making this a rather simple countermeasure to implement if needed. But if he is aware of me before I can use the net, he could possibly escape before it could wrap around him. Though, I do have to question just how fast his reaction time can be. But as I've learned, anything that can absorb magic into itself can be just as effective. As such, I've asked the help of Raven in the creation of a magic catching device. I didn't ask for it to be bat-shaped, but Raven seemed to insist. My other two countermeasures are a tad bit unorthodox, but I do believe would be just as effective when implemented. The first would require a picture of a nickel. Bear with me on this. You see, one recurring thing with Cosmo is his apparent love for a nickel which he named Philip, one who he seems to lose quite often. It is my belief that if I could convince him that I'd managed to hold this nickel hostage, he'll do what I say if it means getting her back. Yes, Philip is apparently a female nickel, and I'm not going to look any deeper into it than that. And the other method would be, well, calling Cosmo's wife. Now I can't really show myself to Wanda and Timmy without the risk of Jorgen knowing I got close to them. But I can at the very least subtly inform her of his antics behind her back. I'm sure a simple note would be enough. Going off of what I've seen, they'll consider it as nothing more than a sudden convenient notice. As someone who has been married to him for thousands of years, it's pretty clear she knows how to keep him under control. She might be miffed with him for a time, but I'm sure they'll move past it eventually. They always do. If I'm lucky, Cosmo will be the only other member of this group I'll need to make a contingency for, which leaves me time to look into someone. I don't know about you, but I think it's time someone did something about that babysitter. If you also have a character you wish for me to cover, or just want to support this channel, I'll have a link to my Ko-fi page. There will also be a Google Doc with the list of characters who have ever been done or already commissioned by others.